Is it really time to legalize prostitution? My name is Randy Rogers, and I want to discuss today an article that I read called Why It's Time to Legalize Prostitution. The article was written by Kathy Reisenwitz, and it was published on thedailybeast.com. Her purpose is to persuade the audience, the readers, that by legalizing prostitution, it will create a safety net for sex workers, and it would also be beneficial to the government by cutting down on the amount of trafficking that is currently happening. Reisenwitz reports that violence among sex workers is much higher due to the fact that it is legal, and that prostitutes or sex workers will not report the crimes for fear of their own, self being criminalized for prostitution. I tend to agree with Reisenwitz on this. As I was younger, we would rob the local drug dealers in the neighborhood, and we would take their money and give it to the less fortunate. They would never call the police on us in fear of capturing their own criminal activities and getting themselves in trouble. So, Reisenwitz also reports that by legalizing prostitution, it would cut down on the HIV and the STD epidemic that is currently plaguing the population. She states, in fact, that the data clearly shows in favor of sex working becoming legalized because it would improve public health. Now, even if there were certain measures put into place, like making it mandatory for sex workers to get tested, I don't see how this would be beneficial. How could this be monitored? If a sex worker got a card saying that they were clean from diseases and went out tomorrow and had sex with someone and potentially got a disease, they are no longer clean from having diseases, yet have a card that says they are clean from having diseases. So this would not cut down on the STD and HIV population. The sexlaws.com reports that 15% of prostitutes who had prostituted for at least 6 months had an STD. So again, how could this be monitored? Reisenwitz also reports that working with instead of against sex slaves would cut down on the amount of sex slaves there were, and that more of them would be able to be rescued. Her point being that sex workers would no longer be slaves to the trafficking. I disagree. Traffickers and people who do illegal things will always find a way around the system. They will always try to find a way to outsmart illegal processes. However, in this sense, by the government legalizing prostitution, the traffickers now have a competing market, with the government being their competitors. This is simply called supply and demand. I can understand where Reisenwitz is coming from with wanting to make prostitution legal. She sees sex workers and the struggles that they must go through on a daily basis to earn ends meet, and the horrors that they face when dealing with traffickers and being sold for cash. However, I also believe that sex should only be for pleasure in a relationship and not for individual sale. This reading should be more about why prostitution should remain illegal, and how the government's motive for only wanting it to become legal is so that they can profit off of it. So now we've come to the end of my speech. But before we close, I want to cover a few things that we went over. Why Reisenwitz believes that prostitution should become legal, the dangers that are involved in prostitution, the horrors that sex workers face, the trafficking that involves trafficked slaves being held against their will, the government for wanting to legalize it, stating that it would cut down on the STD and the HIV population, and the reasons I believe it should not be legalized. And next, I would like to show you my visual on the reasons why I believe that prostitution should not be legalized. This is an article that I read that have the 10 top reasons prostitution should be illegal. And it talks about how women do not prostitute themselves by choice, and that, prostitution is not a career option. So when you have time, read the article. And if you have any questions, please respond to this email, and I will respond to you as soon as possible, and we can further discuss. I want to thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.